Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. Our victim of the day is Rick Trotman. He's CEO of Barksdale Resources. Now there's a lot going on with Barksdale, and I've got questions, but why don't we let Rick go ahead and give us an overview, and we'll go from there.
Thanks for having me on the show today. And yeah, Barksdale is a exploration company focused on base metals. We're down in the desert Southwest, so that would be southern Arizona as well as northwestern Mexico. In the Sonora province. And we have a couple of assets in that area that range from kind of copper gold to truly polymetallic assets, kind of copper, lead, zinc, silver style projects. And we are in the exploration phase. We're looking to unlock a lot of value down there. And soon here in the next couple of months, we should have the drill rigs on our first project and drill our first drill holes as a company. So very excited and looking forward to this interview today.
Okay, well, thank you for the pithy overview. And even though everybody's all crazy about gold and silver these days, you know, a good contrarian needs to be looking for the next wave, and that's why I'm talking to a lot of industrial metals companies recently, actually. But before we get to your projects, let me ask you, gotta say, you look pretty young, and you know, that's great for race car drivers, but for geologists, I kind of like silver hair, long beards, you know, lots of experience, lots of discoveries under their belts. You know, who are you, and why should investors trust such a young fellow as you?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a good question. And quite honestly, I'm very similar. Look, I like to have those gray hairs, as we call them, around that have the decades of experience, and you know they're probably as old as the bloody rocks that they're exploring in. But you know, I'm young. I'm aggressive. I'm eager. I'm hungry, and I want to have a win, and I want to win for my investors. So I'm not going to wait a couple more decades so that I mature fully, so to speak, before I get out there and make people money. But what I look to do is actually surround myself with people that have those experiences. So I am young. I come from kind of a mixed background. I have a master's in economic geology from the Mackey School of Mines in Nevada. I did multiple years of exploration in Nevada and the Carlin Trend and down in Mexico, looking at epithermal vein deposits. But then I kind of transitioned over into equity research and spent quite a number of years doing the research route as well as private equity funds. So I actually invested in the mining sector. So I'm probably one of those people that's, as they call it, an inch deep and a mile wide. So, know a little about a lot of things. And, I think in this situation, you're not only investing in me, you'd be investing in the team. And, I've got Lou Teal on the docket here. He's a big porphyry guy. He's made lots of discoveries in South America for Newmont over the years, as well as Peter McGaw is a key advisor here. So and most of your viewers would probably know who Peter is. So lots of that gray hair, or in Peter's case, no hair. Yeah, so I'm young, but I am aggressive.
Yeah, I did notice that actually, and Peter's got his finger in quite a few pies. Without getting him in trouble, how much of his time do you get? I mean, what does it mean that he's your technical advisor?
Yeah, so Peter is an expert in a style of geology or style of deposit called carbonate replacement deposits. That's his niche. That's what he's been working for decades. He's had many discoveries over the years in that kind of genre, if you will. And the property that we're looking at in Arizona has potentially the world's largest CRD in the Taylor deposit. And so, from that standpoint, Peter's very excited and happy to work with us. And it doesn't hurt that the project's an hour away from his house in Tucson. So we get Peter's time when we need it. He's done things ranging from marketing with me to actually training some of our geologic staff on the ground on how to explore for these things. What are the subtle signs that you're looking for when you're out in the field? So, he's there for when we need him, but, he's not a day-to-day employee for the company. Right now we're more in the permitting process. So, that takes up most of our time. But Peter makes himself available when we need him. Let's put it that way.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to ask about the permitting, but before we get there, you have this project in Mexico, IOCG, we understand, with precious metals credits. But the crown jewel in your presentation is one of your projects in Arizona. You have a constellation of property acquisitions there, all near South 32. Walk us through if you will, briefly, walk us through the logic. And I mean, it's great to be close to South 32, but why these properties and why should we get excited besides just the fact that you're in a good neighborhood?
Yeah, so look, it comes down to geology in my mind. And so when I step back and I look at the district in a whole, I see a very large hydrothermal system with one of the world's largest CRD deposits sitting right to our east. And that's that Taylor system. It's 150 million tons, more or less, of higher grade lead, zinc, silver ores. If you look at the top of that system, the oxidized portion that Wildcat looked to mine back in the day, it's another 50 odd million tons. So you've got 200 million tons of CRD sitting just to the east. And then on our property, we've got this big porphyry that's too deep to be mined as an open pit called Sunnyside. And that's, depending on the old work that's been done on it, and the drilling that's been completed in the past, anywhere between 500 million and 1 billion tons of, kind of 0.3 copper. And really what we're looking to do is drill this gap where all of these fluids came off the porphyry and caused the formation of the CRD. Our thesis is that, you can't get the fluid from the porphyry to the end of this system 3 kilometers away where you form mineralization without going through the gap. And that root zone, as we call it, is on our property. That's what we're looking to drill. And so that's why I get so excited about this, because we've got a very large demonstrable system. And what we're really looking to do is fill in the blanks. And that gives me a lot of excitement, especially when the neighbors next door are effectively constructing the head frame that we're going to be in the shadow of, right? So they're de-risking our project with their dollars every day. And I like that type of leverage as a CEO.
Understood. That's a really compelling story. You've got point A and point B, and how would the fluids not be there? Unless point B isn't the source. Could there be another porphyry on the other side that you don't have that could be the source of their mineralization?
Yeah, look, that could be the case. But when we look at mineral zoning, especially on, elements like manganese, we really see the edges of the system kind of light up. And we get that traditional zoning pattern where you get the minerals falling out furthest away, kind of like the manganese and things like that. And then you go into your leads and your zincs and your coppers, and, you're looking at your copper golds kind of closer into the bullseye, so to speak. So we see that traditional zoning pattern in all the rock chip work that we've done at surface, a couple thousand, samples that we've pulled over time. And so, look, all the classic zoning patterns are holding true. There could be something else out there. Obviously, we don't have all the data from the property next door. I wish that I did. I'd be a much wiser man if I had all that data. But until proven otherwise, we firmly believe that Sunnyside's the heat source. And that's what we're working towards, really, getting data around and fleshing out.
Okay. Well, fair enough. That makes sense. So this is Arizona we're talking about here, not, Western Massachusetts. It seems like you've been in this permitting mode for a while. What's the hang up? Why you're not building a mine, you just want to drill?
I know it's I'm from Alaska, so it's kind of like pushing a glacier up a hill on a cold winter day. It's truly an endeavor, and we didn't think it would take this long, quite honestly. But look, what we have is our federal mining claims that are administered by the U.S. Forest Service, and in the States, you've got two different branches of the government that administer claims. BLM, which is, a little bit more friendly than Forest Service, and that's Department of Agriculture. They have a different mandate at the end of the day. And, there's more of a preservation mandate than BLM, which is more of a create the most net benefit for the, American people's type of a mandate. So it just takes longer generally. And the EA process that we have to go through to get the permit is just, it's laborsome. It takes a while. And on top of that, we have, a team down in Arizona on the Forest Service side that, I would say needed to come up the learning curve on mining. So, it's been kind of hold them by the hand and guide them through type of process, which is a giant pain. But at the end of the day, we know that getting through that process is kind of the ultimate value driver for us, at least in the near term. So, we've been kind of head down, just marching through it. And that's why we haven't marketed too much over the past couple of years, because we were that boring permitting story, right? So now we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, and so we're starting to get excited, starting to ramp up things, especially down in Mexico on the new project, which I'm sure you'll quiz me about. But then, Sunnyside, I think we're on the downhill slope there. So, I'm always the constant optimist. I'll knock on wood here. I think we'll get through it here, in the near future.
All right. Well, I noticed that you just picked up some drill core, which you paid for with shares rather than cash. A nice deal. Is any of that in this gap, or is it just sort of, confirming the theory, or is there any potential for this new drill core that you picked up to actually start connecting the dots for you?
Yeah, to be seen. So we know that there's been at least 30 drill holes on the property, over the past 40 some odd years, 50 years actually. Most of the holes that were put into the property were focused on these shallow Supergene copper zones. There's actually quite a large chalcocite blanket over the Sunnyside deposit. I think ASARCO put it at 200 million tons or something on that order. But then this was also around the time where they kind of came up with that whole porphyry exploration model back in the late 60s, early 70s, and all the signs that they were seeing at surface led them to the belief that there was a deeper porphyry. And so there's maybe a half a dozen holes that go into that. And then while they were stepping out from that porphyry to try to find the total extent, that's when they tagged into that skarn CRD zone. So we have had the holes that are in the skarn. And then we've had probably half of the remaining holes that are on the property in our core warehouse. And so this deal really brings in, probably another 40% of the historic drilling. So we still have to go through and see how much is actually there and then compare all of those intervals to what we had, assay records for and things like that. So there's still some work there. And we're hoping that, there's some holes in there that we actually don't have assays for, which would be quite exciting.
Sure. Well, yeah. It certainly beats just twiddling your thumbs waiting for the Forestry Service guys to come around on the guitar. But hold on a second. Supergene enrichment zone sounds pretty good, but not enriched enough to be worth mining?
To be determined. So ASARCO kind of pegged it at a couple 100 million tons of probably 0.2, 0.25 copper in there with a little bit of silver.
But at what depth?
But I don't think they. It's relatively shallow. Some of it's nearly outcropping.
Really?
It goes down to maybe, 500 feet, 600 feet in some areas. It's not one straight coherent blanket. It looks like there's some, the water table. There's either some post-mineral faulting or the water table kind of moved around. But nevertheless, they never really did enough work in there. It's pretty cliffy area, so I would imagine pulling a pit in there would just be a nightmare. So that's probably why they didn't look at that potential back in the day. Nowadays, if you wanted to tackle that, it'd probably be an in situ leach type approach, I would suspect. But once we get this permit, then we'll actually be able to get in there and do some drilling and see what the extents of this are. So we'll be able to bring more knowledge to the table, so to speak.
Okay. And just real quick, the permit will be obviously not just 5 acres of disturbance, but a larger plan of operations type permit. How much work will you be able to do with that?
Yeah, so that's the key difference between Forest Service and BLM. Like BLM, you can do that 5 acre NOI. And if you're less than that, you're good to go. But the Forest Service doesn't have a size threshold. And so it's more of a time threshold. And because we're looking to be in there for a long duration, we had to go through the EA route. And so we're looking for, it's actually minimal disturbance. I think it's like 9 or 10 acres in total. It'll be up to 30 drill pads and an unlimited amount of drilling within a 7-year duration. So it gives us the ability to get in there and do pretty much all the work that we would need to do in order to figure out not only what's there, de-risk it, but then do some of those engineering type works that you would expect if a deposit keeps advancing the way you want it to.
Okay, very good. And are you still picking up more property in the area? It seems like, not so long ago you were, but are you done, or is there more of interest that you can add to
Yeah, no, we're always looking. So this region has, a number of potential properties that, could come available one day. There's lots of private in-holdings and things like that. We're always working on those types of things, but being able to forecast if and when they'll come through, I'd like to pull out my crystal ball here for you, but we'll take it as it comes, and we'll hopefully get a couple of those deals done. But you can't forecast too much there.
Okay, all right. So meanwhile, back at the ranch in Mexico, We have this IOCG setting. Normally, you hear about IOCG, and the next thing people say is Olympic Dam. We've got the next Olympic Dam, but that's not what I'm hearing from you. So, yeah, why don't you walk us through the San Javier story? Briefly, what makes this different, interesting? Why should people get excited?
Sure. What makes it interesting is the fact that it's actually seen quite a bit of drilling. Probably 25,000 meters in the main deposit back in that '04 to '07 timeframe. And as you know, that was kind of a really hot spot in the market. Back in the day for copper was well above $4 at that point. And the group that had this thing was failing. They had a mine in Utah that was kind of going down the drain despite the high copper prices. And this was supposed to be the savior of the company. And so they drilled the heck out of it. They just pushed the drilling fast, trying to get this to production as fast as possible. And their idea was a heap leach, style copper oxide mine, which was similar to what they had in Utah. And ultimately, the copper price fell during the GFC, and they went bankrupt. And this project just sit on the shelf for a dozen years. There were some ownership issues that the people that bought it out of bankruptcy had to clean up, and it took them forever, and they missed a copper cycle, and you know how that story goes. And so for Barksdale shareholders, the message that I keep relaying and reiterating is that there's tons of historic data on this project, but it was never put together in the correct way. I mean, for instance, there's a resource on this of probably 50 million tons. But there's no geologic model to actually underpin that resource. There are all these faults that kind of host or chop up the resource, but none of those were in the model. So there's lots of opportunity here for us to actually go back to the basics, work this thing up from bare bones, and hopefully make it larger and higher grade within the same footprint, and then take those learnings and step out, find more, and then apply those lessons within the district, and hopefully find a number of these deposits. And there are lots of prospects at surface that we're hopeful will turn into actual deposits. So I don't think this is an Olympic Dam. I would love to be able to find that feeder zone and have that giant monster of a deposit, but quite frankly, I don't think we need it to make a deposit that actually can provide an economic benefit and a win for our shareholders. So I'm hopeful, but look, I think within the context of what we know, there's lots more to find, and we'll be happy with a couple 100 million tons instead of a couple of billion.
All right, but all right, so I'm looking at some of the highlights in your presentation. 6 meters of a 9% copper. That sounds really great. But they're not all that good. I mean, 6 meters isn't all that thick either. It's hard to get to 100 million tons without a lot more results like that. So, what's our pathway from where you are to a goal like that?
Yeah. So absolutely. So, look, the first thing that we need to do is figure out the ore controls. Like, how is the actual mineralization coming in and being in place, and how does it react with the other rocks that are in this area? So we know that there's lots of disseminated copper that kind of bleeds out into these prospective units, but what we don't know are how much copper are in these structures, what are the roles of these structures. And so while we're concentrating on these structures, it's merely to try to figure out the kind of fingerprint of this deposit, if you will. And so if we can show that there's high grade domains, that will help our understanding and help us in the exploration process, try to find more. And so, within the same footprint, if you take a 0.35 average, grade, which was more or less what this deposit was, and you block out a higher grade domain, you can increase the overall grade of the deposit. It's not saying that you'd probably high grade and selectively mine, like a couple of million tons of higher grade, but it helps the overall deposit economics at the end of the day. And if you can find those root zones where, the real humdinger grades are at, then that's really what you're looking for and striving to find. So I don't care necessarily about tons. I care about, margin at the end of the day. And that's what, I build models before I go into deposits, thinking about what it will take to actually succeed. And we'll plan all the exploration programs around feeding the model with results that, generate those returns.
I'm music to my ears. I like to hear the focus on margin, but it also just looks like, at least from your sales materials, it looks like I didn't actually get the story you just told me. It looked like you were looking for higher grade veins within this thing. So I'm glad to hear your explanation. But it also seems like there are at least some areas that are more precious metals enriched. Is that just a credit to the overall thing, or is there a gold/silver story within this?
Yeah, too early to tell. I know a couple of facts. I know that there is gold, and I know where the gold's at, but I don't know what it all means yet. And so, with that in mind, there are certain areas of this deposit where you see, kind of that copper dominant, but gold is present type of mineralization. So you get 0.3, 0.4 copper, and you get, 0.1, 0.15 gram gold that comes along with that. And then there's other areas of this deposit that have very high gold with very low copper. And so you're getting, 5, 10 gram type gold with almost no copper. And so it looks to me that there's multiple pulses of mineralization. And so trying to figure out the timing of those and then the spatial distribution of those different pulses is going to be one of the key things. I know that there will be gold, but we'll have to see if we can actually segregate a different population that can be mined, right? Because if you have copper oxides, you're not going to throw the copper oxide material onto a heap leach and then expect to recover the gold, right? So we'll have to delineate zones that are gold rich that can be separately processed, and so we'll have to go through that process.
All right.
But we have the smoke, and so that's the key, and now we got to figure it out.
That was quite a forward-looking statement, and I appreciated that you were waving your hands when you said there will be gold. So,
well, I know that there will be gold because there is gold. I could not tell you how much gold.
I'm teasing you a bit, but I appreciate that. Okay, so, and this being Mexico, no permitting issues, you could go in tomorrow with the drill rig if you were ready to go, or what needs to happen next year?
Look, we still have to go through a process in Mexico. It's a much simpler process than the United States, mind you, but we still have to submit our drill permits. We've done the kind of environmental transects that we need to do to generate the reports needed for the permit filing. Those are all done, and we're pretty much, I'm hoping that we file the permit request this week. But down in Mexico, in Sonora specifically, it's more of a 30, 45-day type process rather than the multi-year endeavor that we're going through up in Arizona. So we're hoping to be drilling here in the near future. If we don't squeak it in, if we don't have the permits by, kind of beginning of December, then we'll likely start a program in early January. Everything kind of shuts down there in the winter, right, for Christmas.
Well, yeah, not for snow, for the holidays. Understood. La quincena. So, all right, you raised $1 million earlier this year. You just closed not so long ago on 6+ million Canadian. So you have cash, you have targets. What are the deliverables? What should a prospective shareholder expect you to deliver over the next couple quarters?
Yeah, so a couple of different things. First and foremost, we're going to add to the team. So we need that, some of those gray hairs, as you discussed earlier, to help us with this technical program. So you'll see some announcements in the near future around that. And then, we'll start our technical program, and that's where we're really going to deliver the most milestones. So we'll start drilling at San Javier. That will provide consistent news flow, consistent drill results. Hopefully we'll be able to do some other things in that district as far as, bolting on additional properties and consolidation down there. And that should take us all the way through 2021 at the minimum. And then on top of San Javier, we expect to get a drill permit at one of our projects in Arizona called San Antonio. It's one that we haven't talked about, but it's a property that we acquired from Tech Resources last year. It's kind of a never been drilled porphyry target sitting under some shallow gravels. Looks like a high level porphyry system. We're very excited about that one. Hopefully we'll get the permit in January and be able to drill that kind of Q1 of next year.
So that one would be on BLM land then?
That's on Forest Service as well.
But
because it's a short duration program, we can go after a permit that's called a categorical exclusion, because the whole program, soup to nuts, will take less than 2 months, including the remediation. And so we're hoping to get in there with an RC rig, prove that we have a system and collect enough data to then go back into the permitting process and do a full EA on that. But priority obviously is to make the discovery, and so we're very excited about that. And then later on in the year, we should get the Sunnyside permit, and then that would capture most of the attention of the company going forward. So hopefully we'll have enough drilling data at San Javier that we can kind of flip the permitting crew over to San Javier and take the technical crew up to Sunnyside, and kind of go forward in that fashion.
All righty. Okay, so now I'm putting my investor hat on and putting my geology hat aside, and I'm noticing that Sprott bought in, but he seems to be buying almost everything this year, so let's set that aside for the moment. It caught my attention that the Cisco guys invested. What was their interest? Was it was it Sunnyside or San Javier, or what brought them in?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. So one, Sprott, that was a 2017 vintage investment. Yeah, so he's been in it for a while. He's held his 2.5 million shares. He's waiting for us to drill Sunnyside, and then hopefully I can deliver great results, and hopefully he'll pull out his pom poms and be a big vocal supporter of the company at that point. Cisco,
you just need to add silver to your name.
Well, the Taylor Hermosa is probably top 5 in the world as far as silver resources that are, not in production. There's a couple of billion ounces there. So I'm sure it kind of makes him, his mouth water a little bit. Cisco is a different story. We brought them in 2019 as a major investor, and that was simply because they understood the district. So they had made a major investment in Arizona mining, helped them consolidate their land package, bought a royalty, and so when I came in as CEO, I quite literally, I targeted groups that I felt were most up the learning curve as far as the district, the geology, the potential, and Cisco was, the furthest along there. And so they made an investment in us, and it's purely based on the Sunnyside exploration potential. They've seen the data on both sides. I imagine they know more than me as far as potential is concerned. And the same thing with Tech Resources. We brought them in last year as well as an investor. And I think they were always viewed as being a major contender to buy out Arizona mining. So they were in the district with a property. I'm sure had looked in the tent, a couple of different times on Arizona mining. So, I try to find those big corporates that have that institutional knowledge already existing, because it's so hard to get them over the line at the end of the day. And so, I like to start. I like to start the race before everyone else has started. That's the only way I can finish, especially with the way that I am nowadays. So anyway, that was the goal, and that's why they're in.
All right, very good. Well, that all makes sense, Rick. I appreciate your time and your patience with my obnoxious questions. I got one more, if you don't mind, and I always have to ask everybody, you want me to put my hard-earned money into your stock, how much of your own cash, not just free options, have you got as skin in the game?
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a great question. I've got most of my net worth in this company, so it's got to work. So I've bought pretty much all of my shares on market since right before I joined the company, all the way up until just a couple of weeks ago. Right after we closed our placement, I bought another 90,000 shares on market. So I've got 1 million shares, a nice round number. And it was all on market purchases. It's the majority of my net wealth. As you said, I'm a young guy. So, I don't have that kind of throw around money that some of these gray hairs have that can walk away from their investments and not sweat it too much. So this is my life, my passion, and this is my way forward. So it will work. As best as I can make it work, it will work.
There's a forward-looking statement. Well, I'm glad to hear it. That's a great answer, Rick. Much appreciated. So I understand. It is interesting. I have to say you've got my attention here. So please make sure that you put me on your mailing list and let us know what happens, and we'll follow up.
Will do. And many thanks for having me on the show today. And yeah. Best of luck.
Okay, you too. Thank you for watching this edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. If you enjoyed or found value in what you just saw, and you're watching this on any sort of social media, please do hit the like button and the share link. Send this on to anybody you think might be interested. That helps us out a lot. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button as well. The number of subscribers helps us get more valuable content to you as well. On the subject of subscribing, I'll quickly say that if you're not a subscriber to our free weekly Speculators Digest, I encourage you to sign up. I promise if you do, we will not send you a flood of daily advertisements. You get one free weekly digest with original research not published anywhere else. Check it out at independentspeculator.com. Thank you and have a great day.